to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. It's Tom Dutta like butter. Hey, I'm coming at you live from Vancouver, British Columbia, and my guest is in the green room. I've got a few things to say to you as we start here. So he's just relaxing, waiting. We're a few minutes late starting. That's on me. And I was just going to have some fun and say, I was reading this amazing book that I got from him. And, well, I got carried away. But we're all about mystery today, and we're keeping you in suspense here. One of the things we're going to do is get into Platos Garden. It's a new segment on the show. So you want to stay right till the very end before we hang up. This is live streaming the next generation of broadcasting. So we're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And after the show, this will be produced into an international podcast, The Quiet Warrior Show, as well as a YouTube premiere video, which is just awesome because you get to see everything by video, which is much better than audio. And we're getting some great feedback on that part of the show. So I want to do something fun with you here and put another camera view on everyone. You can see me there. And just going to take Randy off the screen for a minute. All right, so you can see me. I'm waving at you here, and this is my in-studio camera. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an opening. If you've ever had Christmas where you're under the tree and presents arrive, I had a present arrive, and here it is. So this beautiful book, of course, it was in an envelope, and that envelope address was from way over another part of the world. We'll ask Randy where that is. What a beautiful cover. This is his new book, Cruel Lessons. I really like how at the bottom his name is prominent. You've got a great testimonial. For those who are authors or maybe not authors, one thing a cover should do is be striking enough where you're curious and you go like that. And you read the back and, we're going to hear about what the book's about. I like one of the things Randy did for me. Some authors, they'll mark up the book and write, "Hey, how you doing? Thanks for reading my book." He gave me a nice little insert. So there's this little paper that came, and he wrote me a personal note. I think that's great because authors build relationships with their readers. That's really what we do. I can frame it. I can keep it in the book. It's pretty awesome. Can use it as a coffee coaster. Maybe not. And other things he sent me. This is a beautiful bookmark. Take a look at that. Scarlet at Crystal River. This is his book 3 of the Haunted Shores Mysteries. And then on the back, he's got some people saying, hey, this is a pretty cool book. So the package is great. I'm really excited to get that. Let me tell you a little bit about Randy. I've read from his bio here. He built a successful educational career. He was a teacher and then became a superintendent. Let me just remove this off the screen there. A teacher becoming a superintendent by placing children's needs first, in spite of struggles with politics, bureaucracy, even being fired, leading to a national award, Teacher Leader of the Year. I'm excited to learn about that story. I used these struggles, he says, confrontations with those in power, being harassed, getting fired, etc., into a series of best-selling and award-winning novels inspired by these lessons, which address critical social issues such as racial injustice, human trafficking. Pretty cool. And in the book, I can tell you there's some threads of that. A little bit more about Randy, not just an award-winning educator, author, and speaker. It's Dr. Randy Overbeck, so he's done some things there with schooling. He's turned his experience into captivating fiction. And again, a best-selling series, The Haunted Shores Mysteries. We'll hear a bit about that. He also is a podcaster host, Great Stories about Great Storytellers. Sounds like a pretty cool podcast. I'm going to check it out. Please ask you to do the same. And in there, he reveals unusual and sometimes strange backstories of famous authors, directors, and poets. Sounds like I should be on your show one day there, man. A bunch of more things you'll see in the bio and the show notes. And I like this one here, caught my attention. As a Mystery Writers of America member, he's an active member of the literary community, mentoring emerging writers, participating in writing conferences such as Killer Nashville and the Midwest Writers Workshop. And he also has a multimedia presentation. He goes on the road, speaks a lot. I know this because we had to reschedule the show because of my schedule. And I asked Randy for dates, and he said, I'm traveling here, I'm speaking there. So this man is on the move, and he does a lot of great things. So now, having said that, I'm going to just bring him to the stage. Welcome, Randy Overbeck.
Tom, I'm delighted to be here with you today.
It's delighted to have you, and thanks for the present. Now, whereabouts do you live? I think I know the answer to that.
I live in southern Ohio, a little small town called Lebanon, just north of Cincinnati, right near the Ohio River. So pretty much on the other end of the country from you, other continent from you.
Yeah, that's why I said way away, and that was an honor that book made it here. Were you born there? Is that where you born originally?
I am from Cincinnati originally. I've lived several places, but all of them around uh, northern Kentucky and southwest Ohio. So kind of stay pretty much in this area. My family is very spread. I've got children in Atlanta and Florida, and I've got brothers in New Jersey and Michigan. So the family's pretty spread. But this has pretty much been my home for 70 so years or so.
Well, and there you are. That was one of the questions you never asked in the show. How old are you? And he doesn't. Everybody just told us roughly 70 years. You don't look at. There's something there. We got to find out what's in your water. I I have a surprise. We've added a new segment to the show called Plato's Garden. And so we're going to go into Plato's Garden right away, and it's something that we're having a lot of fun with. So just stand by, Randy. I'm going to bring something onto the screen here. So let me add it to the screen. All right, everybody, if as you're watching this, you'll see this. For those who will be listening on audio, you won't, but you'll have to come and watch this. So there's a copy of Randy's book. So let me just turn the page here and put up a. All right. So 3, 2, 1. Well, welcome to Plato's Garden, everyone, and we're here with author Dr. Randy Overbeck, and we're going to have some fun doing some critical thinking. Now, let me give you a little bit of a background on this, Randy. Plato's Garden, I'm sure as a writer you might have a sense of this, Plato was an Athenian philosopher, and during the classical period in ancient Greece, he was the founder of the Platonist school of thought and the academy from the word, there was an individual named Academus, so academia. So now you know the origins. And this was the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. And so if you can just picture, and I did some research, and somewhere outside of Greece was where this Plato's Garden was supposedly where Aristotle, Plato would hang out and others. And you'll see the three words on the screen there, Randy?
I do.
I'm doing a doctoral degree. I just started in London, and part of why this is in my show right now. And one of the things that I'm learning is that we as human beings, we focus on what we call, doing. We're doing what we do. Here we are. We're in our life. And we don't always stop to think and reflect and go deep behind that. And what's the knowing? And what about the being? Who are we? And how are the threads in our lives and the world connected? And how did we get where we are? So on the next slide here, we've got 3 questions, and I'll tell you how this is going to go, and we're just going to have fun with you here.
Okay.
If we were writing the doctoral, this would be first chapter called The Influences of Context. So the idea here is we're going to just talk through 3 questions each at a time, and what we're going to get a sense of is really what's deeply behind some of your work. We're going to see where we come out of that. So are you ready to have some chat?
Yeah, sure. That's great. Go ahead. Yeah.
So you read out loud the question number 1, Randy, and then I'll get you going.
This question talks about macro, and it says, what was happening in the world around you that may have influenced your public works?
All right. So the first thing I'm going to say is give me a rough date. So when you were teacher and you transformed.
I was a teacher from 72 to
okay, perfect.
83.
Okay, perfect.
And that includes both high school and college.
Okay, let's stop there. Excellent. You're doing really well. So we're going to start and say your public works, if you can agree, you transformed into this author and all these other things you're doing with the life work in about 1983. Would that be fair?
83 is when I began my career as an administrator. But yes, okay.
Okay, so when did you actually end your career?
Oh, when did I finish my career as 2011.
Okay, so we're going to talk from the period we're going to focus on is roughly 2011 to now, because you're still creating what we call your public work. So the first question was, what was happening in the world around you that may have influenced your public works? So Randy, when you're doing this thinking, just tell us the world around you. Don't talk about your books and your work or yourself, but if you can, you think of the events in the world, just how it was during this time leading up to and when you started that work up till today. What
That's
was
a
going on?
that's a very interesting question. Um, Even though 9/11 was pretty close to a decade old by that time, there was still a significant anxiety among the governing government, those
Yeah,
in government, about the possibility of further terrorist activities. So
yeah.
there was a lot of that going on, and that directly influenced how I chose to write my very first book, Leave No Child Behind.
Fascinating. So what we're hearing there, everyone, is 9/11, and I think everybody, when you say that, our minds or evokes our stories. Talk about other things. Was there during that time in the world? Was there anything else that stood out for you?
Yeah, it was also one of the many times in my career, yeah, and in my lifespan, that teachers were being devalued. So there were significant attacks on teachers at that particular time. There were undermining of teachers in some segments of the public, not all segments, but some segments of the public. So that actually was what inspired me to decide to, when I craft my novels, to start with a teacher as a hero,
Yeah,
showing
yeah,
showing the characteristics of the best teachers I knew and putting them into the best characters.
very interesting, especially in the one sentence teachers and attack. That's sending my brain on a journey. Staying in macro again, the global. Do you remember back then? We know we look today. Obviously, we're still in this period where you're creating your work. So there's wars that have broken out. It's unprecedented. Can you just think back again to the latter part of your teaching career through till now when you transformed? What was the world like? Because that's a long period of time globally. You can talk about economics. You can talk about leadership. Talk about global.
Well, I mean, the sad fact is that we have not had a period of peace during that time at all. So
Yeah,
starting from 2002, I guess, 2000, from then on, at one point or another, we've been engaged at some way in at war in the in the Middle East. So that's been kind of an overshadowing thing. And then if you move past that, and you're talking about something that's 12, 15, 16, then you start talking about the in our country, not in Canada, but in
yeah,
our country, this horrendous um, partisan divide started getting wider and wider. It's always been there, but it's gotten much worse, much more vituperative, much more angry, those
yeah,
kinds of things. That's very much a part of our world in the US. Still is. Worse
yeah.
now.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. It's interesting because again, I immigrated. I was born in the UK. My father was in the military. My parents from Fiji originally. My grandparents India. Here, because of the media, and you have social media, and then you have all those back channels. The other level of media, YouTube and all. You're absolutely right. As I started growing in my public work, and we're shining the spotlight on Randy Overbeck, everybody, Dr. Overbeck, who's written great books and on our show today. Randy, things started seeping into my social media feeds and onto my radio show. And what I'm fascinated with is the culture in America, the culture in Canada, the cultures in Europe, all affecting guys like you and I who put ourselves out there creating public work. Very fascinating. All right, everybody, are you having fun here? Bit of the Twilight Zone, because what's coming next? We're going to go into the second question. So let me just back up again. Macro is global. Meso is your industry. So here, what we want to do is we want to focus on a few things that we learned from Randy's bio. Randy, I read it out loud there, but you were educator. You went from teacher to superintendent, and then you had some struggles. You mentioned politics, bureaucracy, being fired, and then now you transform your career into this author. And then if you keep going down that track, what was going on in the industry that you became part of, which I assume you could call it media, or you could call it, publishing or writing. So yeah, just start us there.
Well,
That
yeah, I think the industry of I'll focus on book publishing.
Okay.
Could talk about social media and all the rest of that, but book publishing was absolutely transformed over that period of time. So starting at 2010, maybe on up, from then on up.
Yeah.
At that point, there were multiple, I don't know because I have forgotten, maybe as many as 12 publishers. I don't know. I don't remember anymore
Yeah.
because if you discard academic publishing, I'm not going to talk about that for a minute, but because I was involved in that a lot, obviously for 40 years, but
Yeah.
in, in, in other publishing, there were 12. There's now only 4 major companies. So if you want to get your books to the mainstream, to everybody else, you only have, in this country, you only have 4 possible outlets. And that dramatically transformed the pipeline that allowed authors like me, let me rephrase that, unknown, beginning, emerging authors like me, to be able to find some kind of footing.
Yeah.
The other thing that was happening at the same time was Amazon went from a struggling, almost bankrupt enterprise to this mega million thing, and it had effect on every industry. But I'm not sure there's any industry it's had more effect on than releasing of books. And it has caused this tsunami of books to be able to be released, because before you had to go through some, I don't know what the right word is, some channel, something that chose whether or not your book was worthy to be able to be out in public. All of those guardrails were taken down, and literally the floodgates were open. And we went from a couple 100,000 books a year to being released to last year, 4 million new titles were released.
Wow.
The vast majority of those titles are what's called indie published.
Yeah.
And I have many indie published friends who are very good and very conscientious writers. But
Yeah.
the sad fact is that the vast majority of indie published books are books that are not polished, they're not finished, they're not.
Yeah.
And so what that means in terms of the industry is 2 things. One, it made it nearly impossible for someone like me to make it through into those 4 major publishers. And 2, then my books, which are published by a small press, I'll talk about that in a minute. My books have now to compete with, let's just take mystery, with a million other mystery titles that are being thrown out and somebody's got to somehow wade through all of those to try to find mine. So it dramatically changed the landscape that you had to navigate in order to get your book out to readers.
Well, it's fascinating. We're starting to hear your depth of knowledge, and that's one of the things that I picked up in your bio about the work you're doing. You're mentoring other writers, but man, we could be here for a couple of days talking about the industry. When you're speaking in this, my show is based on Hero's Journey narrative, as you know, Joe Campbell's work. In my mind, when you say something, it goes on a journey. So I just wanted to say something to you. So what we're hearing here is we're talked about the industry of publishing, and one of the words that came to mind was consolidation. And it's interesting, back in my early career, before I became a CEO at age 31, and I really transformed into writing books and teaching education only 10 years ago. But in my early career, I would start off in the banking sector, credit unions, bankings in Canada. And in the credit union sector, there was 1,600 credit unions alone in British Columbia. Now, you're in Ohio. British Columbia is one province, the westernmost in Canada. You've been here. Have you been to BC yet?
I have been. I've been to Vancouver.
Thank you. I mean, we're just a beautiful place to be, and we're on the Pacific Rim, so literally it's a port city. But what I was trying to say is we went from 1,600 credit unions. I was in the industry. Every year there was mergers, consolidation. Today there's maybe some of the 5 big ones, and then some of these other small ones hanging on. So fascinating about the publishing industry, what I've learned through consolidation and things in my career, sometimes there's a lot of casualties that come out of that as well, and sometimes you lose the good. The other thing that I was thinking about was the indie piece. Maybe we'll talk about it in the next question. I've never heard the Amazon and struggling and almost bankrupt in a sentence, and I'm so thrilled and refreshed to have you say that, because wow, it really put me in a space that's absolutely true. I remember those times, and remarkable. Uh, I always think about the publishing industry and books. Somebody told me, Randy, that I don't know how many manuscripts are written a year, maybe a million or so. Hard to say. That authors will send them into the big publishers and they don't reply. So you can send out hundreds of letters. And then there's this India, and you're right. I've actually had some people on my show and picked up books of theirs where there's typos in it, and the structure of the book and all. My experience with my own book, I had to submit it through a publishing board at my publisher. So I mean, it was held to high scrutiny, and my publisher said to me that they take 1% of the manuscripts. So this is something I struggle with, and you can talk more to us, is that we don't want to devalue indie publishing or some of the brilliant authors' works. So you can touch on that more as we go forward. So let's go into the mezzo still. So just last piece is flipping back to the part I'm very curious about, which was really the education journey. So, you were a teacher, superintendent, but you had this chapter where there's some dark stuff that happened. I want you to dig into that. And again, just not about you personally, but at that mezzo level, you would talk about things going on in that sector.
Well, I will be real honest with your viewers and listeners. When I moved from being a teacher and a college professor into the world of administration, I was an assistant superintendent or superintendent in 4 different districts.
Yeah.
And I did have some sense that there was certainly political dimensions to those jobs, but I will be honest, I was not prepared for the degree to which politics plays in those positions. You usually serve at the discretion of the board, which means that even though you actually come in and you get a contract, but your contract is either renewable or not renewable at the discretion of the board. And sometimes, when boards change, that's really what happened in my case, was that the 5 individuals who brought me on, wanted me, nurtured me, wanted me to run this district. 3 of those 5, I think, or 2 of those 5 left, and the ones that replaced them had different values. That's what it came down to.
Yeah.
And where I have gotten into conflict was that I have always tried to make all the decisions that I've made from what is best for children. I don't want to. I'm not going to exaggerate myself. I can't say that I always did that, but my goal was whatever decision we're making, whether it was curriculum, whether it was technology, whether it was budgetary, is this the best given the confines that we have? Is this the best that we can do for kids? That was my first question, and the second question was, will it work with staff? Can the staff manage it? Is this something that is reasonable to expect these individuals to tackle this, to take on this responsibility? And then the third responsibility was, can we pay for it? Can we afford it? Where I got into problems was in the third category, because my perspective of what we should be able to afford and what the board wanted was not. I'm not telling tales out of school here, but very often, first of all, I've been in districts that are not wealthy. And every district I've been in, except one was not, but the other 3 districts all had times where they fell on hard times. They didn't pass a levy. They didn't have enough money, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
So when you do that, you have to cut, and it's a horrendous job. You're sitting there on a board deciding which people that you've worked with over the last 5 years are losing their job at the end of the year, that kind of thing. Well, where I got into the problem and what actually cost me my job was the board they did make a decision to axe programs that were more expensive, but served the most needy kids. Okay. And save programs that were also expensive, but serve the higher level kids.
Yeah.
It was a political decision because the parents of the higher level kids have more influence and they'll vote for levies, and the parents of the lower level kids were often single parents and they were not as involved. And so, so we got into some rather serious arguments about that. And that's part of what led them to go, well, this guy's he is not the person we want to lead our show.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for being transparent about that. There's so much packed in there, and I'm thinking about a personal experience from my career going through similar things in corporate America, where I was a leader, especially at the C level. That one of my major roles. That I was talking to somebody yesterday about this same topic, about they're going through restructuring. They're in the education sector. They're at the university level, and one of the comments was, "Hey, because I had a meeting scheduled. I had an email saying, can we reschedule this? Because, we're going through these restructuring and you get the last minute, can you attend a meeting?"
Yeah.
Randy, when I went through my career, I went through 11 transactions, I call it. If you look at my resume, I went through 11 mergers, acquisitions, and they all have some degree of frustration with decision making. And that's why I honor and relate to your story. In one case, I was the CEO of a Canadian company. The American company decided to strip out costs, and we ended up terminating a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
And there was, and let me ask you this when we get into the micro question. For me, there was this tug of war with integrity and my values. And all my life, I had wanted to be a business leader at the high level. I had skills, but I just couldn't stomach some of the things that impacted people, impacted lives, like you're telling us about children and about people who need, and this is kind of the world we live in. So amazing stuff you've shared with us there. So everybody, we're with Dr. Randy Overbeck, who's the author of several books. Cruel Lessons we'll talk about in a little bit. We're in Plato's Garden, and we're talking about sort of the journey and what's transformed. What are the threads in the macro world, the global world around Randy, the meso, his industries, and why did he transform after leaving education into what he does with writing books? So here we are at micro. What was happening in your personal life that may have influenced your public works? We already heard about the frustrations with the education sector, and then the job shifted. Go deeper. Tell us more. What else was going on? I mean, you got a family, you got a wife, you got hobbies, you've got other interests.
Well, what made this really very difficult personally was at that point I had 2 children in college. We were paying college, and I was in the middle of my doctoral program at the same time. So
Oh boy,
all of these balls that I was juggling, and it was, and I don't want to make light of this. The reality is that the way we're structured in education, I'm sure it's everywhere. I just don't know the other industries.
Yeah.
That reduction in staff and having to cut, that's just a reality. And I acknowledge that. I understood that. I just took umbrage with how they were making decisions of which things or which programs or which kids are more important than other kids.
Yeah.
So I decided to make a stand, recognizing that I know at the time that would cost me my job. Probably not. I probably wasn't 100% aware of that. I wasn't that sophisticated at that point. Would I have done it anyway? Yes, probably. My experience has been that it is really true. When God closes a door, he opens a window. And my windows that he's opened has always been better than the door that got closed. So
I love it.
That doesn't mean I'm not terrified when I'm on the end of the closed door, on the inside of the closed door. I still was.
Yeah.
But
This saying about God opened a door. I've had some deep talk, virtual talks about my brain injury 5 years ago and the journey back from it. At the height of everything, I'd fall in a bathtub and lose pretty much everything. My cognitive ability to walk. If you were talking to me back then, Randy, I couldn't get words out. My brain was latent. I still have double vision and photophobia, light sensitivity in the studio, all this. And I tell it, I kind of laugh at it, but man, I dug deep and I found my faith again. This is another story I might have you back to talk about. But I denied my faith in my childhood, given I come from a home of an addicted parent. But there were doors that opened, and if I was to spend time about what are you doing now in your life, Tom, things are incredible. The discoveries through that. I remember when I first got downsized, one of my first major downsizings as a C-level executive, they handed me an envelope and somebody said, "Fueling your future," or "You've just been given, we've freed up your future." And I talked to a lawyer. Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. I was young and I talked to a lawyer and I had a daughter on the way. I'm just married and I had a big paycheck. It just disappeared. And I know you're nodding. And
I
the
understand.
yeah, and I remember at that time, man, I remember the guy sitting across from me. He's a friend and a lawyer. He said, "I know you can't see this now, but he said there are so many people caught in this treadmill of work misplaced. They don't want to be there that would want to trade seats with you right now." And I'm going like, yeah, what a bunch of BS. But as I went through that transition, the doors opened, Randy. I needed to be put out of a situation I really didn't want to be in. So I think your story is so inspiring. Let's talk in the micro still about you. Just quickly touch on this, how going through something like that, I know from my own experience, we always forget that the wives and the kids, but particularly the spouses, go through it with us. And it's very stressful. Just tell us about how, marriage and health, how you navigated that during that time. And then
Well,
get into, yeah,
yeah, my wife was, happened to be ill at the time this happened too, so that didn't help her. But
oh my goodness.
she recovered well, and my wife tends to be a worrier anyway. She's
Yeah,
one of these wonderful women that take in worrying like other women used to take in laundry, that kind of stuff. But
yeah, yeah,
I think probably, Tom, if I look back, I was trying to put up a very brave front, saying, don't, we could do this. I have this option, this option, this option, this option. And she was terrified, going like, "Oh, well, fine, but where are we going to get food to feed
yeah,
our kids,
yeah.
and how do we pay the mortgage for that kind of stuff?" That was a stress on me. I mean, I was very fortunate that I was actually very early. I started getting a couple of job options, and as I mentioned, what I ended up choosing, or maybe what chose me, was a district that needed me much more than the one that I was leaving,
Yeah.
and whose bureaucratic structure was much more supportive of my philosophy about kids.
Yeah.
Those. I, so I would. The one thing that's different from my story to your story is, even though I went through this a couple of times in my career, I was always certain that my goal was to serve kids. I just,
Amazing.
I, that never, that part, it didn't, I didn't, when this hit me, I didn't say, well, maybe I should be selling insurance.
Yeah.
My brother is a very successful insurance. Maybe I should be selling real estate. I have always been committed to serving children at one level or another. I believe that's the highest calling that you can have. And I thought that's what God put me on this earth to do. So in my case, when that door was closing with a bang, I was actively looking for, okay, what am I going to do? The anxiety that you're talking about for the family was, my wife was going, "Oh, gee, now we got to move again. We got to sell the house." So
Yeah,
all of
it's
those
real.
started entering into it.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, it's real, and that's the power of storytelling. We'll get into your books now. The power of storytelling. I'm listening to you, and I'm in your story, and I'm certified in what do you call neuroplasticity, because I learned about the power of neuroplasticity in the brain through my own therapy of my injury. But it was two. Dr. Paul Zak is somebody I've studied, and he really is a neuroscientist who focuses on what's called persuasion and storytelling. He did a lot of work in his lab on this, but I want to share this with you. That Paul, there's two chemicals that release in our brains when we're engaged in listening to a story. One is cortisol. Cortisol is the stress chemical, but cortisol is not bad. Cortisol is sort of like, I'm reading Randy's book, Cruel Lessons, and I'm on the edge of my seat like this. Like, I want to know what's coming next. Is there danger? Is there hope? Is there happiness? Where is this plot going? It's kind of exciting. If cortisol is too much, then it turns into distress, we know. But then
right.
comes along the protagonist and then the antagonist in the story. And then there's something that makes us feel there's hope. And that's where oxytocin releases. And oxytocin is a chemical that creates empathy, it creates connection. And authors that tell stories, do public speaking, and write like you, I love this book. Those things were happening in my brain throughout as my brain was being hacked. And that's why I delve in and I couldn't put the book down. So I really want to honor you for your talent, my friend, because I wish I was in your world when you were teaching and educating, because I'm pretty sure you would be telling some pretty cool stories to your students. Let's just wrap up here, everyone. So we're going to leave Plato's Garden now. So let's give Randy a round of applause. We laughed at you right there. There we go.
Wouldn't be the first time I was that.
Randy, that's the second time I've done that. I did it on the last show, and because I have they're doing vision therapy, and I can't see peripherally as well. I'm working through double vision. I have my soundboard, and I hit the wrong button, so we'll edit that out.
That's okay.
Or maybe one of your gifts to us is sometimes you got to laugh at the world, right? So we can figure that out.
You laugh at yourself and the world. Yes.
Laugh at yourself and the world. So thank you for being in the beautiful Plato's Garden. That was one of the best segments I've done because we took us through. Can you see the power of that kind of thinking, though? It's called critical thinking. We learned in less than 20 minutes about the why behind and all these threads of your story. I never would have gotten that picking up your book. So thank you for honoring us. So Randy, why don't you hold up your book there? Let's put it on the screen. Let's read out the cover to us again. What's the title?
It's called Cruel Lessons. It's the first book in a new series called Lessons in Peril.
Lessons in Peril. So I'm going to put myself back on the screen here. I've got the book in my studio here, Randy. And, one of the things that we love is when authors, or if you've ever been a book signing and authors read, it's a pretty amazing. Randy, I'm putting you on the spot, but just read a couple pages out of there, anything you want that would give us a sense of your voice and also the...
No, I wasn't prepared to do that, but the part that the publisher chose to put in the front of the book, which is actually something that occurs in the middle, is one of the, as you know, is one of the scary or pivotal times in the book. So I'll just do that part because it's easy, and I know that readers will appreciate that. So
just before you start, we're going to set this up so I can edit out the dead space. Tell me the page first you're going to be on.
Oh, I don't know. It's on the front of the book, so I don't remember exactly where it comes from.
Oh, it's on the front. Okay, I got you. So when you say, I got you. All right, so when I say 3, 2, 1, I'm going to set it up, and then I'll turn it to you. So stand by. 3, 2, 1. We're here with Dr. Randy Overbeck on the Quiet Warrior Show live. And, it's an honor to have an author on when they read a part of their work. I'm in studio. You can see on the action cam I've got Cruel Lessons. It's an amazing book. I've read it. I'm going to reveal a review. Hey, Randy, read us something out of the book. Let's get some excitement.
Okay. I'm going to read. I did find it. I'm going to read it from page 380.
Okay.
380. We're in the POV of Amanda, who is the wife of our protagonist, Ken. She needed to get out of here and back to the office. She might need an alibi. She pondered a bit and decided she could say she'd agreed to meet an out-of-town client on the top of Spencer Mountain. He said he was interested in developing the area. She waited a while up here, but he never showed. She nodded and smiled to herself. That would work. Yeah, that would work. The expensive tires grabbed and the Regal barreled off the hill onto the twisting road. Amanda was glad she talked Ken into paying for better tires. She might need them to navigate her way down the road. The seatbelt signal dinged at her, and she shot a glance at the panel. She'd take care of that before she got into traffic. In a hurry, she pushed it, hitting the first curve fast, forcing her to take a sharp turn to set the car down the next straight stretch. From that bend, the road descended quickly, and she felt the car picking up speed as gravity and its powerful engine propelled it downhill. As she approached the next turn, Amanda realized she was coming in a little fast. She slid her foot to the brake. Her concentration on steering the twisting road ahead, at first it didn't register. She dared to take her gaze off the road and look down at her feet before she understood. When her right foot depressed the brake, the pedal glided all the way to the floor. No friction. She pulled her foot back and slammed on the brake again. The pedal slid all the way down. Unbelieving, she pumped it again and again. There was nothing there. She jerked her eyes back. The hairpin turn hurtled at her. On instinct, she kept jamming on the pedal. It was supposed to work. She turned the wheel wildly. The big car shuddered as it tried to negotiate the turn. The two rear wheels slipped off the pavement, spinning in space. With the front wheel drive, the front two wheels managed enough traction to catch. The car veered around the curve and headed down the next straight incline. The heavy vehicle rolled faster as gravity pulled it down the hill. Amanda's mind reeled. What was she supposed to do? White knuckles gripped the steering wheel. Struggling desperately to force her mind to think, she tried to consider her options. It was all happening too quickly. The next treacherous turn came at her fast. She had no way to slow down. Her hand gripped the steering wheel even tighter.
All right, we got to hit the right button this time. Awesome. Not only are you a talented writer, my friend, but you are a great orator. I love it. Now, let me ask you some questions. Let's just get into this. First of all, when you writing, tell me if I'm using the wrong jargon, the fiction or whatever this genre is. It's not
it's amateur
nonfiction.
Mystery.
Okay. And on the front, I'll just mention what Randy just said. There's a quote a testimonial on the front, or a book's blurb. Mastery written, a gripping crime thriller, an amateur sleuth mystery, literary titan. Pretty amazing. How do you go from a thought in your head into putting words down on paper? Do you have a system or process you've learned that works for Randy?
Well, the process that I use is kind of halfway. If you've had other authors here, they've probably talked about being a plotter or a pantser. Are you familiar with those terms?
No.
A plotter means somebody who sits down and basically outlines the entire story from beginning to end. And a pantser is somebody who literally kind of has an idea, sits down at the keyboard and just starts typing.
Very cool. How do you spell that second?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. P-A-N-T and then an S on the end of it. S-E-R. P-A-N-T-S-E-R. Pancer.
Interesting.
It's a colloquialism, I guess you would say. So
yeah.
Called plotter or pantser. I'm kind of in the middle of those two.
Yeah.
There are segments of the book that were pantsed. I just literally had an inspiration, sat down, and started writing it. Yeah. Other parts of the book took a lot of organization to be able to make it work. I mean, this is the most complicated novel that I've written of the 5. This has 7 different POVs. We see the story from the position of 7 different POVs. 2 of them students and 4 of them 5 of them adults.
Yeah. And POV is point of view, right?
Point of view. I'm sorry. Yes, point of view.
That's all right.
So from their perspective, so you're seeing the story happen from their perspective, just like in this case, we're seeing the story from the perspective of Ken's wife, Amanda. So to do that and to balance that and to make sure the chapters lined up together, that takes a great deal of organization. You couldn't just pants that out. It would have to come up. But so I fall somewhere in the middle of that. Many of these things came up as just an inspiration. It's amazing that I've taken the pieces of my life that have happened. None of these things have happened in my life. Okay. And I'm not Ken, but some of my characteristics are onto the main characters.
Sure.
But it didn't, I found amazing that I could take actual real people that I know, twist and change them some and make them either really good people or in some cases really bad villains. So
yeah,
it worked very well.
That's very cool. I was, my brain went to comedy, and I was just, not that your work's comedy, but I was watching a comedian that's really on the rise, or probably one of the best. I won't mention the name for the sake of focus on the show, but they do that. They bring in people they knew and people they knew in their life, and they create characters around it. And when they tell the story, it's almost like they're emotionally connected into it because they know they know that person or that story. I just want to honor Randy here for a minute. Randy, we're talking about cruel lessons. I'll be revealing very shortly international book review for you. Everybody, what happens is you pick up a book like this, you turn the cover over, and you read the back. So I'm just going to read it. There's no spoiler here. On a school camping trip, 5th graders experiment with a dangerous new hallucinogen and die in a horrific accident. And by the way, I remember reading the book, and that was the first part of it. And oh my goodness, their death shattering the quiet town. Assistant Superintendent Ken Parks, hoping to redeem a fatal mistake from his past, he grasps the opportunity to conduct a district investigation of how students are getting the drugs. Almost before he begins, the cops make a stunning arrest, but Parks battles on, convinced the real pusher is still out there, poisoning more kids until he receives an anonymous threat. If he continues, those close to him will pay. Is Parks willing to risk those he loves for a chance at redemption? Everybody, I recommend you pick up this book, you get it, but don't just get it. Do a review, post it on Amazon and on goodreads.com, wherever Randy wants you to. It's a treasure. My next thought about this is coming from somebody who's written a nonfiction myself. It's 458 pages. Like, man, did you ever hit writer's block? And generally, nonfictions are longer. Is there a reason for that?
I don't. My primarily responsibility is fiction. I wrote a lot of nonfiction in my career as part of my job, but
I see.
In my new career, everything has been fiction, and this is a little on the longer side. So the first couple of books were 325, 350, 400, something like this. This one is longer. In fact, there was a debate in the publisher between editor and a vice president, all of whom I know, really good people.
Yeah.
Do we need to take part of this out? This is longer than what we normally publish, that kind of stuff. And I will give kudos to my editor. My editor read the whole thing and said, "Oh no, every chapter needs to be in here. This is exactly what we need to have." So, it is. I'm hoping that it keeps everybody engaged enough that they don't even pay attention to what page they're on. Oh, we're here already. Okay.
Yeah, that's Randy, I'm gonna bring you into my real world reading it. So I totally give a thumbs up to your publisher, your editor, for making that decision with you. And I like when the publishing company and the editor puts you in the driver's seat as the author. You control it. I've heard horror stories from some of the big publishers. There was one fellow I know, he sent his manuscript and came back with 40,000 requests for change, and by the time the book was done, it wasn't even what he intended. And unfortunately, this is part of one of the warts of the industry. But I because I'm working on my vestibular, my balance from my injury, I go down to a treadmill and I get on that. And I love the Kindle version, so I bought your Kindle version, and I put it on the treadmill, and I'm immersed. So I have this goal of 30 minutes on the treadmill. Now, somebody like me, because of my injury, if I stand on a treadmill, the feeling is the world around me is not moving, so I have trouble balancing, and I really have to focus. Yeah. And so I hate going on the treadmill, Randy, because it's like 5 minutes is like a lifetime. But I put your book on, I started reading it, and 30 minutes, and I'm not embellishing, it flew by. And in fact, that day I have a tracking watch. I did 45 minutes on the treadmill. I didn't fall off. I didn't have any. I was so immersed in the book. It is truly a wonderful story. And there's so many twists and turns and characters. Even for my brain, it challenged me to keep it all in sync. But it's very well written. I like the structure of it. Let me ask you another question from your bio. You talk about social issues that you've weaved into your writing. Just talk about any of those briefly, but tell us, why have you chosen certain social issues, and what might one be? One in this one is about the drugs, right?
Right. Well, I will tell you, I want to give credit where credit is due. I was inspired by another mystery writer. Her name is S.J. Roseanne. Writes really good mysteries. And she was speaking at a conference that I was attending. And at the conference, one of her lines was, and I wrote this down and I've never forgotten it. Nonfiction is about reality. Fiction is about truth. And her argument was that even though you're telling an imaginary tale, readers should get real truth about the real world from what they're reading. So that has been kind of a guiding principle of anything that I write. So in this case, the truth that I'm centering on is about the dangers of youth experimenting with drugs. Purposely, I chose not to set the story in the present. I set it in 95 for a very specific reason, from an organic writing reason. But the other reason is that I didn't want to get into the politics of border stuff and all that kind of stuff having to do. So by putting it in the past and using that as a metaphor for what's going on, I'm hoping that truth is able to be realized more easily than if it was in the present.
Yeah, I really appreciate. Sorry, Randy, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's all right.
I really appreciate that. I'm just holding this up again on the action cam in the studio. I like the structure, but also the size of the font. It's just big enough and not too small. I
Yeah.
really enjoy that. I almost like I can read a page and I'm on to the next page. There's comfort in the way it flows in terms of how it's laid out. I agree with you, my friend. I have to say to you that I hate reading. Shouldn't use the word hate, but I used it. I don't like reading books that bring in politics and all this other garbage. Especially one of the things I'm really focusing on in my doctoral right now is because I'm looking at my public works and kind of tearing them down, is this responsibility that we have, like your feedback on this. When you become an author, in the word author is, you're an expert on something, on the concept. You become an authority, and people don't know what they don't know. So we look into the media now, and there you hear things like fake news, and people hear opinions and opinions. They don't understand what truth is. Authors have such authority and such responsibility to put out works because you're changing my life when I'm reading your work. So talk about that when you're writing. How do you look at integrity and that responsibility? How do you see that in your works?
Well, what I try to do, first of all, I will share with you that for each of the issues, each of the social issues that I decided to weave into my novels, I'm not an expert on any of them. So I have to spend a lot of time researching and
Research.
making sure that I
Love it.
get the details right about whether I'm talking about racial injustice, which is in the first book in the trilogy, Blood on the Chesapeake, or the second book that dealt with human trafficking. I was amazed how much I did not know about the world of human trafficking. So I really worked to educate myself on those issues. And in this book in particular, I've gone much further. So I want to make sure I get this plug in this one. So this book, I'm actually partnering with a national drug prevention for youth group. They're a nonprofit out of the West Coast, and they provide, it's called naturalhigh.org.
Mm.
All one word, naturalhigh.org. They provide resources for parents and teachers to talk to their kids about drugs. The resources are evidence based. They've done the science, they've done the research to make sure these things work.
Yeah.
And they provide these resources to parents and teachers free. There's no cost.
Wow.
So I'm actually giving a portion of the profit of every book I sell of Cruel, every copy I sell of Cruel Lessons to this organization, and I'm partnering with them on that. That's how much I believe in this, because the
Yeah.
only real way out of this drug problem we have is communication. We're
Yeah.
not going to choke off supply. We're not going to kill demand. All that stuff is part of the human DNA. So if you, and I'm talking about children here, you need to educate, talk with kids in a way that makes sense, that will help them make good decisions.
Wow. Yeah, I just love that. I wrote down on my paper here in the studio, the naturalhigh.org. I'm so blown away by this purposeful work you're doing. I enjoy so much hearing that, you're bringing science-based, I think you said evidence-based resources. I mean, this is a book, not just a story, but you're actually trying to make an impact in society, and you're doing it in such a creative and responsible way. I just want to honor that. It's interesting when we talk about children. I wrote down the word purposeful because that's who you are. You were telling me earlier, and everybody, if you just joined us later, Randy was saying that he's always known that his purpose was to serve children. I think that's fabulous, and I I think about from my experience as a child, going into my youth and then my adulthood, and all of the people I've met in the world. I've met many people, especially through my career and my new work and what I'm doing with education publishing. That behind everybody is a story. Behind everyone, there is something that relates back to the early development years of the brain, the first 25 years. Usually it does relate to the nurturing of from parents or from those in the home. And everything starts when when I heard you say, educating and talking to children. I'm so taken by that. That's such truth. And I add on to that, if we can understand that sometimes it's just that one little word we said to a child when we were angry, you're stupid, or we're fighting with our wife, maybe we're drinking too much, and the child's brain can't separate truth it takes it all in as I'm bad, and they're through maltreatment the brain actually can underdevelop itself to deal with stress in life, and that's why I really like some of the things that you're doing here with this work for children and the social issues. You may have heard of I hope you have, the writer Patrick Lencioni. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a book called several books, but because I was in business, Randy, I was reading some business books by him. One was called the Four Temptations of a CEO, and then the other one was the Five Dysfunctions of a Team, something like that. Anyway, I think,
Yep.
yeah. My father wrote a book too. He was a teacher, actually, at British Columbia Institute of Technology, so he was an educator. I think I took after him with my writing and teaching. And my dad used to say, I can't read a book because everything bounces all over the pages, and might be a little bit of ADHD, might be a little bit of dyslexia too. And yeah, and I would read a lot of books, and I still struggle. I read them, but I just am all over the place. And yeah, sorry, my memory, sometimes I lose my train of thought. Where was I going with that? So Lencioni, when I found his book, I remember being on a business trip in a hotel. I read it in one sitting, and I went, "Whoa, what was this?" And he wrote his books as fables, so he wrote it as a fable, and that's why I've turned to your type of writing here, because again, in fables there's characters, story, connection. Those two chemicals I talked about in the brain. I find that facts and figures doesn't work. And this reading your books, particularly going on that journey in the story, is just amazing. So on that note, now I just want to honor you with something. So we're going to put it back on the screen, and everybody, if I had the drum roll here, Randy, we'd have that on too. So I'm just going to put something on the screen. Hold standby. Okay. So I'm going to reveal something very special that I'd like to honor you with here. There it is. Look at that handsome guy. Boy, I'll tell you, there's deep thought going on there. So what you're seeing here on the screen is the 5-star international book review. International because it's in Canada. Everyone, if you buy a book on Amazon like I did, even though Randy sent it to me, when you post a review on Amazon, it finds that you made a purchase, and it tags it as a verified purchase review, which adds to the level of integrity. So this one's verified, and I just realized that there's something that's covering up the corner there, but I'm going to try and read it. Randy Overbeck's Cruel Lessons delivers something narrative from the opening pages. The tragic story unfolds, sets the stage for an intense, suspenseful journey through a quiet town shattered by a horrific tragedy. Assistant Superintendent Parks leads a gripping investigation haunted by his past and determined to prevent further tragedy. The narrative twists and turns, immersing readers in a maze of suspense, intricate characters, and a vividly depicted era. Here's the key part. What I loved about the book was its ability to transport me into the story. The suspense was palpable. I was deeply engaged, constantly on the edge of my imagination. And the book's cover, I think it's brilliant. It's crimson, it's bold, against a backdrop of this school. I think it encapsulated the gripping nature of the story within. And as someone who, as I was mentioning to you, Randy, is someone who typically gravitates towards nonfiction, this book, Cruel Lessons, was a compelling departure for me. And it left me eagerly anticipating my next Overbeck novel. And I'm going to go find your other ones. So I say at the end here, I won't spoil it, the plot, but I urge readers to dive into it. Captivating. It's a tale and experience, a thrill, firsthand, riveting, must-read narrative that I wholeheartedly recommend to anyone seeking an enthralling mystery. My wife says I'm verbose and I can't shut up. Well, hey, I hope that honors you, because people will see it. You're welcome. So let's remove that off this.
I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And that's one thing, Randy, I noticed you do well. I got an auto email from you, and you're going and asking your readers to give you reviews. And this is something that I will put a critique out there amongst the hundreds of authors I've met. Many authors don't have reviews on their books posted. And because being an author is a job, it's hard work. We have to educate, inspire. Yeah, and you're nodding. And so I honor you because you're working hard, man, to ask for those reviews. And so everybody, grab the book, read it, post a review. Now we're going to honor Randy with an award. So you probably knew about this, Randy. Hopefully, I'm not sure if you did, But let's go into kind of like Plato's Garden now again. And if you see on the action cam here, I'm opening up something. So, Randy, you're being inducted into the Quiet Warrior community with this award. And I just want to tell you a little bit about it. So you can see I'm putting it up to the camera. Have you heard of challenge coins?
I can't say that I have.
Okay, so let me. It comes in a little sleeve with a insert. I'm going to just tell you, challenge coins, they surfaced during World War I. The practice of carrying a coin designed specifically for a unit was popular with the Army Special Forces, carrying them at all times, presenting it when challenged to prove affiliation with that unit, resulting in a number of consequences for those who could not produce the coin. The most popular required a coinless soldier to buy a round of drinks. That practice continues to be popular today. I know you're smiling. My dad was in AA before he passed in 2018 for 20-something years, and they had their own version of coins. First responders, I know educators, teachers. So what I wanted was to create an award that special people that come on the show have turned their life, and very few do it, into some purpose to go out and change the world. So the front is the actual show itself, the image, and it's hand-painted and crafted and raised, but what's on the back is Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey narrative. And it's such a detail part of this coin. It's the actual narrative, and you know very well the storytelling narrative. And the whole thing behind my show is narrative storytelling. And so there it is. You're about we've interviewed from all around the world about 260 people, and less than 40 of these a year go out, Randy. So when you have it in your pocket, I want you to know that you are in that upper group of people like yourself who are doing amazing work. So congratulations.
I'm very humble. Thank you very much.
You are a humble man. So let me read out the last thing here off my paper. I don't script these. I go down on my paper, everyone, as I'm interviewing the guest. Words that honor Randy. These are leadership words out of my head. First one is integrity. So you're a man of integrity. 2 is inspiring. You inspire me. I want to stay and learn from you actually a bit more about writing. 3 is trailblazer. Blazing a trail, and what you told us about how you're tying in resources and things to your work. Fantastic. And the 4th one, purposeful, because you've got a purpose, serving children, and you're doing it. And I'm so honored to have met you. So congratulations. Tell us where people can get a hold of the book. You also touch on these multimedia presentations. There's a couple of cool things you do and conferences.
Okay. Well, I will share. Let's make it easy. The best way to get a hold of anything about me is at my website, which is very simply, it's if you're viewing this, you're seeing it at the bottom of the page. But if you're not, it's just www.authorrandyoverbeck.com. Couldn't be simpler. You have I have universal links on each of the books, which means that wherever you like to buy your book, you can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo Books, Apple Books, whatever. The link is to that particular book is on there. You have a way you can learn about and even request a schedule of one of my presentations. I actually have a couple of presentations. The one that goes with the trilogy is called Things Still Go Bump in the Night, and it's a discussion about the role that ghosts play in our culture in general, and how I use that information as part of my books. The newest one that I will actually only be giving it for the second time tomorrow is called Everything You Want to Know About Publishing But Couldn't Care to Ask. So, and it talks about some of the things we've gone into in kind of a fun way. I do it a little differently. My presentations are interaction. So I do have them do question and answer, see if they can guess how many books are published a year, how much an author makes on a book, those kind of, how long a day do people read? How many minutes a day do people read? Okay.
Now you're teasing me. Okay. What's the answer to that?
In the U.S., according to the study in 22, 18 minutes.
My goodness. Goodness. That is wonderful. So tell that's all available on Randy's website. Randy, this course.
Yep.
Is this this one you were telling us about just now? Is that a virtual thing?
I have done them virtually, but I prefer to do it I've done them in 10 states all over the United States. So whenever I travel, I extend invitations to groups and organizations in that area and say,
cool.
If you're interested. To date, I've done about 150 of these presentations. So
Congrats. That's
I'm
amazing. Congrats. What great wisdom and knowledge to share. We'll have to talk again about finding a way to get you up here in Canada, because if it's not virtual, unless I come down to the U.S., I've got some friends in Ohio too. One of them is a professor at a university that gives me reason to come down and meet you. So
I'd
on
love.
that note, yeah,
Uh,
on that note,
can I do one plug before we leave here?
you
We
can,
didn't talk about my podcast. I want to get that in.
please.
So, Great Stories About Great Storytellers is exactly what it says. It is the backstory of famous authors, directors, and poets who have given us great stories, but we don't often know what really is behind the story. So I tell like stories that they don't know about authors that they're familiar. John Grisham,
Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe, Anne Perry. We just did O. Henry, which people might not recognize the name, but O. Henry is the gentleman who gave us the story, The Gift of the Magi. So there are things, Charles Dickens is on there. So I tell the stories that people don't know about the authors that they are already familiar with.
Wow, that's very cool. So I wrote that down. We'll put it in the show notes. So great, everybody, Randy's podcast, great stories about great storytellers. I'm going to go bookmark that on Spotify where I listen. And you've got me now, and I'll give a rating to it. Make a recommendation to me, Randy, personally. Which of your books should I pick up next? Because I got to get one. I got some time off.
I would suggest you go get Blood on the Chesapeake, which is the first of the trilogy. They can be read in any order, but
Yeah.
if you're starting, you might as well start with Blood.
When did you write that one?
The Blood on Chesapeake was released in 2019. The Crimson and Cape May was in 20, and
Yeah.
the third one, Scarlet, was in 21, and then this new one is 23. I
Fantastic.
have another one that's out that's in the process. Well, I sent it to agents last week, as a matter of fact. So
Very cool. Well, listen, as somebody's got a broad network and somebody gets listened to, I hope. If you ever want me to read anything and do a review or even read a manuscript, give you some plug on it, feel free to use me in any way you can for the rest of your life. And maybe I'll twist your arm to sign me that book and send it to me.
I'll be glad to do that. Sure.
Yeah,
I'll be happy.
we'll exchange that after the show. Everybody, let's wrap up here. Find that true purpose and passion like you saw Quiet Warrior Randy Overbeck do today, and live the life that you deserve and desire. We'll see you all back again on the Quiet Warrior Show. And Randy, thank you so much for honoring us today. It was a real treat.
Thanks for having me. I was glad to be here.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
We're still online. I'm taking us off.